very, very difficult to mature until you have children. And there are other ways of maturing, but it's hard. And the reason it's hard, I think, is because you're not mature until someone else is more important than you. And it's possible that that would happen with your wife, your husband, but not like with children.
Well, I've been thinking about that. So, we're about to have our first child in a month, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, it's just something that's constantly stirring in my head, that I feel like I've sort of gotten to the end of where I can get mature in my maturation process. Not that I can't change or get better at this or that or something, but I do feel like I'm at the end of one phase right now. I very much feel that. And I think I'm feeling it more and more each day as we get closer to August 22nd, which is the due date.
You also told me, Dave, when we were talking about this before, that you started to think about being older as well. And I suppose that with your concentration on the present and the lack of role models, that there was no real vision for what it might be like to grow old in the gay community, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's funny. The gay community, I hate that phrase. Yeah. I know. Even as you said it, it's like, it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't think of you as part of the straight community.
Right,
it's just one of these things. We say these things. We don't even know exactly why we're saying them. But I didn't have that role model. I didn't have that. There was no map. There really wasn't.
Brotherhood of the marginalized.
I guess that's a group I could be part of, I suppose, in some bizarre sense. But even that is sort of nauseating, I guess. Mm-hmm. But so we're on tour together, and David's texting me, and we're going back and we're talking on the phone and we're FaceTime, and it just keeps coming up, and you keep talking about this on stage. And on top of everything else, I'm meeting all of the people that are attending the shows. Mm-hmm. And you know this, the amount of people that were in new families, or that the wife was pregnant for the first time. And I'm seeing the joy on these people's faces. All of this is hitting me. And then you keep saying this thing that for most people, they have to do it. But there are these exceptions. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking, well, wait a minute, could I be the exception, that I could live a fully actualized, best possible life without having kids, and at the same time be married to someone who wants kids? Then what am I even married for?
Well, right. Well, that does beg that question, doesn't it?
So now these things are really hitting each other. And because because the map wasn't there, the roadmap just wasn't there, I started going, man, I really have to think about this now. And I remember one night you were on stage, and I had the best seat in the house every night because I'm just off stage left. So I'm basically watching you.
Stage right is actually better.
Stage right, I guess. Yeah, I suppose. It depends which country we were in. But I'm basically watching you from behind. So I have sort of the back view of you to the crowd. So I genuinely felt that every night, that I was part of the show every night in that sense, part of the audience. And I remember you said it one more time, and I thought, all right, I have to do this. I have to do this. And that's why it was always incredibly honest when I would say to the crowd that being on tour with you, for every reason that they were there, that you helped these people change their lives, that you did that to me too. But now, and I think the purpose of this conversation, which, by the way, if you would have said to me 10 years ago that I'd be having this conversation publicly, first off, that I'd be married, I wouldn't have believed you. That I'd be having kids, I wouldn't have believed you. That I would be willing to talk about this, or even someone that someone else might look to help map it for them, I'd say you were completely insane. This is not really something, I'd rather talk about politics. I'd rather talk about the culture wars and all of these other things.
This is a political issue too, because we're trying to sketch out a pathway, I suppose. I mean, our culture appears to have decided that gay marriage is, well, I don't know if acceptable is the right word. It's become part of the structure of marriage itself. And so now the question is, okay, what does that mean? And that certainly opens up the question on the child front, because, I mean, in some ways, marriage is the union of two people, but in a possibly more fundamental way, it's the union of two people to provide the foundation for children.
Right.
And I would say that's actually paramount. I mean, our society tends to flip that around, and we tend to think of marriage as something that, well, you find the partner right for you and you live happily ever after. It's, well, no, not exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe exactly, if you also understand that living happily ever after means living for other people in many ways, particularly your children. And then, of course, that complicates the issue on the gay marriage front because, as we're going to talk about, it's also more technically difficult to have children if you're a homosexual couple.
Right. So if you take just the marriage part first, meaning that two people are going to choose to share their life and live together, share a bed, et cetera, et cetera. I would say culturally in America, we kind of moved past that. I mean, Trump ran, he's the first-time president. He was on stage with a rainbow flag. It was, and nobody cared. Or not, I shouldn't say nobody cared, but enough people felt, okay, you let people live the way they want to put this down and move ahead. But you're right, that marriage has to do with something else. Otherwise the word marriage wouldn't mean anything. It's like nobody really cares if you live with your friend for the rest of your life or you live with a man or a woman. Right. People do this all the time in life and it doesn't really matter. So what really is the purpose of really living with somebody and really being with somebody and sharing your life with somebody is to build something lasting, something that you've learned and know and were taught, and that you can hand that on to the next generation, and hopefully they can attain and retain some of that.
That gives you that permanence in your life too, right?
Yeah.
That multi-generational permanence stretching indefinitely into the future. And I mean, part of what marriage does, I think technically, it's the psychological equivalent of what sex does genetically. If people mix gametes, right? Gametes.
Yeah.
Partly because to ensure variability and to stop the propagation of parasites. That's why we don't clone. But there's that mixing as well tends to ensure that deviations from genetic health are minimized. And so the same thing happens on the psychological front, I would say, is that each person has their own idiosyncrasies, and some of those lead them down the garden path to terrible places. But if you're with someone else and you have to negotiate with them constantly, then that opens up the possibility of you mutually modifying each other's personalities so that you both become healthier and that your joint existence is can be a paragon of sorts. And then that's what the child interacts with, is that united front of the two parents.
Right.
And so you get that longevity of view, which I think helps to mature you, but you also get the opportunity to become more fully fledged as a psychological being. And then I think that's furthered as well. I've often thought and said this, and I do believe it's true. It's very, very difficult to mature until you have children. And there are other ways of maturing, but it's hard. And the reason it's hard, I think, is because you're not mature until someone else is more important than you. And it's possible that would happen with your wife, your husband, but not like with children.
Well, I've been thinking about that. We're about to have our first child in a month, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, it's just something that's constantly stirring in my head, that I feel like I've sort of gotten to the end of where I can get mature in my maturation process. Not that I can't change or get better at this or that or something, but I do feel like I'm at the end of one phase right now. I very much feel that. And I think I'm feeling it more and more each day as we get closer to August 22nd, which is the due date. But the first part, you can take, whether it's a straight relationship or a gay relationship, the dance that a couple can do and the way that they can mature each other and love each other and all of those things, that's one thing. But the piece with the kids, with building this sustainable thing, it's not something that has been proven in society yet, really. There obviously are gay couples with kids. And this has been happening for decades. But it really is sort of unseen at the moment, which is why we wanted to have this conversation. And I was like, boy, I don't even know that. In some ways, I don't know that I'm the person that's supposed to have this conversation, but maybe that's exactly why I'm supposed to have this conversation.
We're trying to figure it out.
If you'd like to see more honest and insightful conversations with Jordan Peterson himself, check out our Jordan Peterson playlist, which includes every interview I've ever done with him. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist. Both are right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.